the course of researching a review, I was clicking through Whedon's Internet Movie Database page for one reason or another, and saw an entry for a movie that not only had I never heard of, but came out 1 year before Age of Ultron. In Your Eyes is the second release from Bellwether Pictures, the LA-based production studio founded by Joss Whedon and his wife Kai Cole. The movie was written by Whedon, directed by Bryn Hill, and stars Michael Stahl-David and Zoe Kazan. The first picture made by Bellwether was the Whedon written and directed adaptation of Much Ado About Nothing that I, despite being a major Shakespeare and Whedon buff, have not been able to bring myself to watch. It's too soon, okay? Bellwether Pictures' mission statement, and I got this off their Wikipedia entry as I couldn't find a website for them, is to bring micro-budget movies to an audience, bypassing a traditional studio structure. It's an admirable project, something Whedon gets to give life to by virtue of his other successes. As I mentioned, a year after In Your Eyes released came Age of Ultron. I think expectations are important when it comes to independent films, especially ones with fantasy or science fiction ambitions. Just as when sampling food, there's value to preparing your palate for what you're about to eat, rather than treating every meal like Black Truffle Night at the Michelin Star Awards ceremony. So, before we get into the review, let's consider what the term micro-budget actually means by making a totally illogical comparison between two movies, purely because their names are similar. In Your Eyes had a reported total budget of about $1 million. For Your Eyes Only, which I googled more than once by accident while researching this review, had a budget of $28 million back in 1981. Reportedly, Roger Moore, the most embarrassing Bond in the history of the part, Timothy Dalton FTW, made $7 million from the film. That's 7 In Your Eyes'. Effective low budget in film inevitably means simplicity, generally simplicity of design, but it does not mean simplicity of concept. Dylan and Rebecca live on opposite sides of the country, unaware of each other's presence until one day when Rebecca is sledding and Dylan experiences the journey through her eyes, and suffers a similar fate when she hits a tree. Dylan's penchant for being a smart man who hangs out with scumbags continues into his adult life, as we discover he is now on parole, having taken the fall for the crimes of his two degenerate friends. Rebecca has married a successful and professionally consumed man who manages her as though she were a tool in his company.
Oh yes, thank you.
She's good.
Dylan is also terribly insecure around women for reasons we never quite learn or understand. And because we never get to the heart of Dylan's insecurity, and it comes in the form of liquid mantastic that is Michael Stahl-David, it feels a little bit like a detail created purely for some situational comedy later on. A problem that comes up a couple of times for me with the movie's plot. More on that in a bit. One day, while Dylan is late for work and rushing down the road, he and Rebecca have a breakthrough.
Can you hear me?
Through experimentation, they discover they can't hear each other's thoughts, but they do experience each other's senses. As they get to know each other, they discover that they've been sharing experiences throughout their lifetime without realizing. It is the unfolding of their relationship that is the most joyful aspect of the movie, along with the delightful implications of their shared senses. Zoe Kazan and Michael Stahl-David give charming, extremely watchable performances that somehow conjure chemistry in a relationship occurring between two characters that are almost never in the same room together. It's very fun to watch. It's almost a shame then that the movie had to have a plot, because almost nothing about this plot feels in service of these two engaging characters. They are both presented predictable obstacles to overcome that feel perfunctory to me. Plots created for characters from other lesser movies, not for the characters being embodied by Zoe and David. Dylan's problems with his past and Rebecca's choice of husband spiral into a series of irrelevant set pieces, ending in a strange finale that all felt like a distraction from what I really wanted to watch, the two of them falling in love with each other, or maybe discovering the love for each other they always had. But let me be clear, I absolutely enjoyed In Your Eyes, and I do recommend it. Call it a bias for fun fantasy concepts and characters with chemistry. It's a really powerful idea, this notion of shared experience, and reminded me of one of my favorite latter season Star Trek episodes, Attached, in which Picard and Beverly end up psychically linked and share an intimacy in their relationship they've never discovered before. It's a fun concept for a reason I think that is simple and profound. This is definitely a Whedon script, as evidenced by the characters and the Whedonific dialogue.
Methinks the man doth protest too much.
I pretty much thought that you were PMS.
Yeah, a lot of people get us mixed up.
The movie is admirably directed. I liked what Bryn Hill did with color to distinguish between Dylan and Rebecca's perspective, and how that comes together at the end. There are also a couple of sequences in which she found really clever ways of portraying their shared experiences in a single space. Moments I won't explain here for spoilers, but moments that for me verged on visual poetry at times. But ultimately, it's the performances of the two leads and their supernatural connection that carried In Your Eyes for me. I stumbled on an Ask Reddit question I've been kicking myself myself since for not saving. The question was, why do you think fiction is valuable as opposed to nonfiction? Why does it serve a purpose in culture? And my favorite answer pointed out that the nature of the human experience is that it is an inherently solo one, utterly linear, thoroughly rooted in one single perspective, yours. But fiction multiplies that experience, allows us to live other lives and other experiences in our imagination. I wonder if that isn't part of love's value as well. There is some freedom in coming to grips with that part of the human experience is to be lonely. It's not something to be afraid of or to run from. In fact, resistance can make the ache inflamed. Loneliness is just a part of the human condition. In a crowd of 100, we are still alone, trapped in our own heads, separated by millimeters of bone, a bit of flesh in the gulf of individual experience. Sometimes the possibility of two people coming together seems an unlikely miracle, especially when its beginnings are supposed to occur from the woefully inadequate nourishment of language. And sometimes I find myself wallowing in that perspective, dealing with my own loneliness by employing a sort of defensive resignation. But watching in your eyes, I was reminded partially of why we choose to pursue love. Reminded in a way your average middle-of-the-road romantic comedy can't manage. Relationships can be work, and tedious, and agony. But at the pinnacle of that experience, there is probably our greatest opportunity for connection. Those brief frozen moments in time when we can't find where we end and the ones we're with begin. Where we finally know and are known by someone else, if only for a moment.
I mean, the best thing, the only thing about me that I like is you.